Right, hello ladies and gentlemen and welcome to today's video, and today we're going to be taking a look at replacing a HDMI port on this Xbox One, and it's got some issues with the display. It seems to like HDMI cables some more than others, and some TVs it will display on, some it won't. All sorts of weird and wonderful stuff. Some it will display sound on, others it won't. It's just a bit of a mess. So we've been asked if we can replace the HDMI port today, which we're going to do. So it's going to be this one just here, of course, the TV out one. Not to be confused with the HDMI in. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this port and we're going to reinstall a brand new one onto this particular console. So to do that, what we're going to do is, so it's the one nearest this power connector, remember, when you turn it upside down. We're going to employ a similar tactic to what we do with the PlayStation 4 port. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply some flux to the bottom 4 locating pins on this port. So I'll just point those out to you in a sec once I've just applied some flux to this area. Okay, so you can be fairly liberal with it. And the 4 points in question are these 4 here. So you've got 1, 2, 3 at the back there, and 4. So what we're going to do is we're just going to apply a little bit of solder to those pins. So this is leaded solder. Of course, the ports are installed in the factory with lead free, which isn't ideal. So by adding a bit of lead solder to it, you actually just make the port a little bit easier to remove. Some nice fresh stuff. And just work it back and forth into the holes. This serves 2 purposes really. One, it makes the old solder easy to remove because it kind of dilutes all the crap in the lead free stuff down a bit and adds some nice leaded solder into the equation, which lowers the melting point of the solder and makes it easier to remove the port. And secondly, because these HDMI ports anchor in through the ground plane, it effectively acts as a big heatsink, and by actually using a little bit of leaded solder and working it into the joints, what we actually do is get some heat into the board to give us a starting position, which is nice. So what we're going to do now is we're going to apply a bit of heat to this port. So, or should I say we are in a sec, because I have forgotten something. What you want to do as well, before you do this, is just apply a little bit of flux to the pins on the rear of the HDMI port you're replacing. Now then, word of warning for you, don't be tempted to give these a nudge at all. Seriously, right? If you've been heating it up for a couple of minutes and you're not thinking you're getting anywhere, do not be tempted to push it, because as soon as you do, these boards are really rather weak. As soon as you put any pressure on the rear pins on this port, if you try and push those out, you will, and I promise you this, because the ground pins that locate it are so close to where the actual pins situate on the board, you will lift the pads. And when I'm saying lifting pads, I'm not talking PlayStation style where you might lift a couple. You will lift each and every single pad on this board. So never ever 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 be tempted to do it. Which is why you need some good equipment to do this kind of work with. So what we're going to do is we're just going to wave the wand around, and we're just going to get started by getting some heat in. So you're looking for the joints to go shiny. And what you might see as well is the solder might very well sink through the holes. So you can see there maybe on the left hand one at the front there, this one here, nearest the wand at the front, has actually, the solder is sunk in through the hole of the board. That's kind of what you're looking for. And just go round in circles. So nice and slowly. Now then, the pads that these ports join onto are fairly long. They're fairly long and slim, unlike the PlayStations, which are fairly short and a little bit fatter. So they anchor in rather well. So what you've got to do is concentrate the heat around the 4 pins for sure where it's holding in, because of course you've got to loosen those up. But what you want to do is you want to work towards the centre as well. So make sure you get plenty of heat in and around the centre, because you want to loosen all the pins, okay? So these pads are fairly big, they're fairly long. So if you don't reflow all the solder across the length, then the pins will stick on. And that's when you're going to get impatient, you're going to try and push it out of the board, and that's when you're going to do some serious damage. So don't ever be tempted to do that. So we're just working back and forth here. So we're on 485 degrees C at 100 litres of airflow per minute, so the same settings as we would use for a PlayStation. And you can see there now that our port is falling out at the bottom. And there we are, ladies and gentlemen. So the port's fallen out of its own volition, which is cool. We're going to put that to one side, and then we're going to get our new one here. So this is our new HDMI port, all rather nice and shiny. And what we're going to do is we're going to employ a very similar tactic to what we do with the PlayStation again. So we're just going to flip it over, and we're going to take a look at where that would normally join on. So we're just going to bring this in so you can see it, hopefully. So we're just going to check and see where our HDMI port site sits. So it's just here, so we'll get some focus on it for you. There you go. So you can see how fairly long and slender those pins are, so you can appreciate the fact that they don't take a lot of strain. They really do not like any pressure on them. And you can see what I mean, because these big ground pins here are locating holes for the rear of the port, and they're very, very close. Not only are they large and therefore take a bit of heat themselves to get out, but because they're so close and the cross-sectional area of the pin is more or less the full length of that, as soon as you try and push it, all the strain goes through these connectors here, and you can see they're not going to take an awful lot of abuse, and they don't, and they will all lift out, trust me. So don't ever be tempted to do it. So where is the PlayStation? To be honest, I wouldn't say the PlayStation's a particularly forgiving port to replace, but compared to the Xbox One, it is. So if you struggle with PlayStation 4 ports, you really probably don't want to be having a go at an Xbox One. So what we're going to do is we're just going to apply a little bit of fresh solder to our header. Okay. So we're just going to do that. Get a little bit of leaded solder. We've put some flux on there. Not the greatest tip in the world to use, to be honest, but no, definitely not. Shouldn't be lazy. Oh, I was being lazy there. I was being lazy there. Tell me off for it. I'll tell myself off for it later. So just apply a little bit more flux on that. Wait for our iron tip to heat up. Okay, it has done now. So just going to go in there. We might need a bit of desoldering bread to tidy that up properly, really, but see how we go. So yeah, we have got a little bit much on there. Just going to move the tripod for the phone camera out of the way for a sec while we're not using it. So we're just going to get a little bit of that up with some braid, just to get the excess, nothing more really. So you can see there now, each pin has a nice coating of leaded solder, which is cool. Now then, the one thing that can make this a little bit awkward if you've got a fairly slender tip is look how far back those pins are actually set from the edge of the board. Again, the PlayStation head is quite close to the edge, but this one isn't, so you can find the collar of the iron tip can actually catch and make it a bit of a pain in the arse for you, but hopefully not. So what we're going to do is we're just going to support the board. We want to raise it up off the counter slightly while we reinstall the new port. So as before, we're going to use a very, very similar method to how we would install a PS4 port, and I'm just going to bring the phone camera back in. So we're going to employ a very similar method to how we would do a PlayStation. And we're going to... I'm just going to move that out of the way because it's getting in the bloody way. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply some heat to these ground pins here. So we're going to apply some heat to those. I'm just wondering if I can actually get you a little bit lower to this so you can see what we're doing. So we're going to apply some heat to these headers, okay, so that the ground holes. So these 4 here. So we're going to apply some heat to those. And then what we're going to do is we're going to offer our new port up once that's molten, and we're just going to drop it in through the top. Okay, so this is a little bit awkward on these particular ports because you've not got an awful lot of room to get tools in. So whereas with the PS4 you can actually get hold of the top of the port like that. Well, you can do here, but you've got this lip on the top, so you can grab hold of it by the top of the port, right? Okay. In fact, I don't think I've got one to hand, unfortunately, but you can get hold of it quite easily. Whereas with this one, you've got to account for that lip at the top. So if you do get hold of it with a pair of grips, it is quite easy for it to flip out of your grasp, if you like, and go everywhere. So it does take a little bit of practice. If I can get hold of it in here for you, I'll show you. But it kind of wants to flip out of the grip of the... kind of wants to flip out. So you can either get it by the bottom if you've got some fairly low profile grips, or you can use a pair of tweezers if you like, but that can be a bit of a pain as well because it hasn't got much grip on there, so it can slip and move out on you, which when you're trying to position these things isn't ideal. So if you are going to get hold of it in the grips, you've got to get hold of it quite far back. If you can see there just how far back we're having to grip that. So you can see where the lip is. So it can be a bit of a pain. Now then, this is going to be a bit of a pain because I'm going to try and do this. Can I do this around the viewfinder with the camera? Can I? Without it being a complete pain in the arse? I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this through the viewfinder with the camera, but we'll have a go. We'll have a go, but I'm not promising anything. So, we're just going to apply some heat. And we're just looking for the solder to start going shiny. And again, you know, you're looking for it to kind of sink back through the hole. So I'm going to try and stand up and do this. This really is not an ideal setup for doing this. But you're just looking to build some heat into the board. Once it looks like it's gone shiny and you're in a good position, offer the port up slowly. And just drop it through and hold it square. Wait for it to set, and then you can release and let go. I've just caught the stand with my foot, which was clever. And if all went well, now then, it's nice and easy to situate these, and it's certainly easier than it is on the PS4. And the reason is because it's actually got some plastic sort of guider underneath. It's like a plastic shelf it actually sits against. And all you have to do is just sit it against that. And it makes it nice and easy. I don't think you can really see it there. I think you can really, even if I get some light on it, I don't think you'll really be able to tell. But they sit slightly proud of the board. and it's basically on a little black plastic shelf, and it's that it sits on. So that's really cool. So that makes it really nice and easy to situate these things. So I'm just going to check the alignment of the port now, just to make sure we've got it nice and where we want it to be. So you might need to do some adjustment, okay? So on the back of our port, it's still sat slightly proud of where it ideally should be. So if you need to do some adjustment, again, we're just going to prop the board up. We're going to apply a dab of flux around the rear pins because it's sat slightly up, which isn't a problem. It's quite normal, really. But we just want to adjust those pins slightly. So I'm just going to apply a little bit of support across the other side of the board as well, so it's fairly sturdy. So we're going to give it a quick push there, make sure it doesn't move too much. And then we're going to get some hot air. And we're not aiming directly at the back of the port. That's the important thing to notice here, okay? So we're going just behind it. We're not aiming at the port at all, we're going behind it. So remember, the board will already have quite a bit of heating because we've just replaced the port. So you don't have to work too hard at this. So we're not placing any direct heat at all at the port. Okay, so we're molten one side, we're molten the other. Okay, lovely. And we're just going to lift up. So you'll see the solder go shiny. And then you can just give it a quick push with either the back of a pair of tweezers or a pair of grips or whatever you like. And you'll notice then that your port is sat nice and square. So you don't want to put any direct heat to the back of the port because you will melt it. And you do run the risk of damaging it. But in our instance that's nice. So when we pushed it down, that hopefully might have just soldered the pins for us as well. So let's have a look. So let's get it over the back of... Let's get over the back. Let's get the microscope camera back in, even. Okay, so we'll try and find it for you. So that's the power connector. Here's our HDMI port. Look at that. So you can see there, our pins actually look nice and soldered. Okay, so we're going to give them the old pin waggle test, and to do that we need a pair of tweezers. Now then, I do have my sort of right angle tweezers, but I don't like to use those to test pins with. I prefer to push them with my straight set. But in this particular instance, I have no idea where my straight set have gone. Oh, they're there. It's not tradition if we don't lose something on this channel. We lose something every video. Just love it. So we're going to give each set of pins a push. So first one there, first pin, good. Second pin is good. Third pin is good. Fourth pin is good. Fifth pin. Fifth pin is good. Sixth pin is good. Seventh pin. Okay, so that needs a bit of solder on it. Eighth. Looks okay. Ninth. Looks okay. Right, yeah, so... Oh, what a shame. We've still got a little bit of work to do. Oh well. So, we thought we were getting away with that easy then, didn't we? But no. Okay, no problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply some flux. Okay. So we're going to apply quite a liberal amount to the rear of the port. You'll notice it goes liquid fairly much straight away because there's quite a bit of heat built up into the board. And what you're going to want here is a nice fine tip, and you are going to want to tin it with some solder. Now, bearing in mind, before we did this, we actually tinned the pads on the board with a bit of solder. So this should make this job nice and easy. And what we're going to do, and this is going to be a pain in the arse, because we're going to get between the microscope view backlight and there's a bunch of caps in my way, so this could be awkward. But we're just going to walk along each pin. And you'll notice that because of the flux and the heat of the iron and the fact that we pre-tin the pads, if you notice, even though we aren't applying any more solder, the pins are going nice and shiny. And you can notice there that what we did was we literally didn't solder on each pin, we just dragged it across, we just walked up each pad like that, and that's called drag soldering. And basically what that does is that encourages the solder that's on the pad. Basically it follows the heat of the iron, so as the iron passes over the leg, it actually, the flux causes the solder that's already on the solder pad to actually draw up onto the leg of the HDMI port, which basically means we get a nice solid connection, we get a nice looking professional connection, and also we don't get any horrible sort of bridging or, you know, that we might otherwise get, or clumping of solder on the pad or the pin that we might otherwise get if we tried to solder each one individually. And then all I've done is just gone down the bottom of each pin and held the iron against the pin and the base of each leg. Again, just to finish that joint off and just to make sure that the solder has a nice even coating on both pad and pin. And there we go, that's it. That's as hard as it gets. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to apply a little dab of IPA to the back of this port. Going to give it a brush. Could probably do with a new brush these days, you know, but we can clean it up properly afterwards, after we've completely finished. But you know, any excess you can get here, it's easier to get it now while the board's warm rather than waiting while it's set. But you can see how nice and shiny those are. Those look beautiful. I'm just going to go in with the Q-tip just over the back, just to mop the excess solder up. You can see now that looks absolutely beautiful. I'm just going to go in and give it the nudge test again, just to make sure all those are nicely soldered. So pin 1's good, pin 2's good, 3's good, 4's good, 5's good, 6 is good, 7 is good, 8 is good, 9 is good, 10's good, 11's good, 12's good, 13's good, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 and 19. So all 19 pins are nicely soldered there. We have no bridges, as you can see. None of those are wanting to move. So all we've got to do now, I'm just going to move the scope camera back out of the way. Probably bring the phone camera back in. We'll just check the condition of the joints underneath, where the ground locating pins are. Now these look fine. These probably pass as they are, but I like to finish the job off nicely. So we're just going to apply a dab of flux or solder paste or whatever it is you want to use to the back of those 4 ground pins again. I'm going to change the iron tip to the fatter, bigger tip. I'm going to wait for that to heat up. Eventually. This tip isn't the best in the world. It's near death, but it doesn't owe me anything. Luckily enough, I have got a spare ready and waiting for when it does cark it. Okay, so we're just going to apply a dab of solder to each of these ground pins, just to fill the holes back up, just to finish the connections off nicely. There we go. You can see there from earlier on when we did the initial tinning, we've got a little bit caught down the bottom of the ground plane there. Doesn't really matter, you can leave that there. That's not going to hurt anything. If you do want to clean it up though, then you can. You know, you just get a bit of desolder braid, go along the edge, just to pick the bulk of it up. And there you go. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. So that is about as complicated as it gets. It's very similar to the procedure we use on the PlayStation 4, but it is a little bit more difficult. owing to the location of the port on the board and the actual design of the pin header on the board itself. As you can see there, they're a lot longer and thinner, and because of their proximity to these back ground pins here that locate the port, if you give it a nudge or you're tempted to push it at all, whereas on the PlayStation you might lift a couple of pads, on this you'll lift them all straight away, no questions asked. You will lift them out. If you lift them out, you're on your own, unfortunately, because repairing 19 HDMI pins is just a pain in the backside. So we'll give that a proper clean off in a bit, but we'll plug this in and test it now, and hopefully we'll have a nice working Xbox. Capture's still running because I can't see the box from here. And there we go, and that's about as difficult as it gets. So it's a lot easier with a big microscope, obviously. Okay, so what that does, that runs down to this little diode here on this side. So we're just going to link into there. So the way we do that is I'm going to get another pair of tweezers. It still looks to be running, which is cool. So we're going to get another pair of tweezers. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that this wire is as flat to the board as possible. So we're going to hold it flat, and then roughly where we want it to bend, we're going to hold it roughly where we want it to bend, which is about there. I'm going to make sure that's nice and straight. Bend that roughly into position. So roughly around there. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get the iron. And we're just going to mark it